What up? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And look at you. You done stumbled upon little OTB Saints, where we bring you all the latest black and gold coverage.
Who are the Saints going to draft? Who's going to be their quarterback? What does the salary cap look like? All that information and more.
Hope you enjoy it. Like, subscribe. Time to play a little footsie with our guy Nick Underhill. neworleans.football is the site. You could call it neworleans.football.disaster after Sunday. Not because the site is awesome. The analysis remains great. But the Saints are an abject disaster right now. Nick, what's going on, man? How we doing today?
Just putting one foot in front of the other and trying to get through the day, man.
Yeah. I've been using abject disaster too much. I got to stop that as well. But I don't know. I guess, I mean, plus, like, there's only so many ways you could say a team's bad. I should be using more than one. Nick, I don't know what to say about Sunday. I told you that I already felt like it was a game where kind of the season was on the line. And there are many ways in which it could have played out where I think my response would have been more measured and more, oh, okay, you lost, but this and this. I don't know that you could have made it feel any worse than what you had to witness on Sunday.
Oh, man, they just keep shooting themselves in the foot, and it's as bad as it can get. I mean, you aren't scoring points at all. Like, you know, it's just field goals, 6 field goal attempts. And, you know, the thing that bothers me more than anything is I think the tone afterwards, like when we're talking to Dennis Allen and them, and, you know, it just kind of sounds like, you know, oh, like we got yards, but we aren't scoring. So I think if we can move the ball in the other 80 yards, it's fine because that means we're eventually going to move the ball in the red zone. Well, it's week 12, man. Like, you know, if you're walking to the bank and you have a bunch of money in your pockets and you get mugged before you reach the door and you don't make the deposit, you don't have any money anymore. You're broke. You don't have nothing. And, you know, I don't want to hear about like the almost stuff and the maybe stuff. And, you know, it's just, it's bad. It's broken. You just lost to the Falcons. You didn't score any points. Your starting quarterback hasn't scored a touchdown in 2 games. You know, it's just, enough's kind of enough at this point, and it feels broken, and I don't think it's going to get better. I think this is just kind of what it is, and it's going to be one step forward, one step back, one step forward, one step back, and I'm tired of watching it, and, you know, it just feels like a significant underachievement, and I understand there were injuries in this game, and I understand Ryan Ramczyk had penalties, but I don't want to hear it anymore. Like, there were just too many blown opportunities early in the season to where a holding penalty by Ryan Ramczyk in week 12 shouldn't matter. Like, it shouldn't matter. You should be able to overcome it. You're playing the Falcons. Desmond Ritter's their starting quarterback, and you don't have any way of stopping him from running. You can't stop their running game overall. All your investment in the offseason, the very first moves you made was to make your run defense better. It's not better. Your quarterback doesn't work. It's just broken right now. And look, there are 6 games. Maybe they find a way to figure it out. But at this point, it's just kind of like, you know, what's even the point? What's the point of figuring it out? Like, it isn't going to be better next year. So, you know, I think it's just at a point where they got to seriously start looking at everything and figuring out, you know, where it's going to go from here, how it's going to get better, and how, you know, who they're going to do those things with, because it just can't. It can't be this. It can't be this again. Like, it simply can't. Like, the roster is going to get older. Their schedule's going to be harder. Running it back the way it is now, even if you get some momentum and, you know, get to 9-8 or whatever it is, like, I don't think you're going to be better next season with the way you're doing things. So I think the hard evaluation needs to start, like, right now.
It's not going to get better if they continue with the, you know, current structure that they have. But I think, Nick, that's the issue, and you kind of just said it. I don't think that they'll change what the structure is as far as the play calls, the personnel in the field at certain times, and putting certain players in position to succeed or fail. Like, that's the problem. In the NFL, that should never happen. If something's not working, you shouldn't stay with the same, but that's what the Saints are doing.
They don't do anything really. And look, this is tough to say after this last game because they did feature Chris Olave early in the game, and they got him going. He had 114 yards before the half, and that was really the first time the whole entire season I felt like they did something to feature a playmaker on either side of the ball. I don't think they do anything to feature their playmakers on defense. I don't think they do anything to feature their playmakers on offense. And everything is just so much harder than it needs to be. And, you know, one of the things that I thought was crazy this week is after the game, Alvin Kamara says, hey, like, we don't have an identity. We haven't figured it out. We don't know what we want to be. We aren't doing those things. And I think that's true. I don't see a team with an identity. I couldn't tell you what they do well. I couldn't tell you what they try to lean on besides shots down the field. Like, they don't have any type of identity. Then the next day, Dennis Allen goes up there and says, like, no, I disagree with that. We do have an identity. We ran the ball well in this game and we're explosive. Okay, well, again, and I've said this before, but it's insane to me that, like, if those are the two elements, you have 45 play action attempts this year. You double that number, you're 20th in the league. That's your identity, and you aren't doing anything to build on it and, taking the shortcuts that can kind of help your offense a little bit by doing things that everybody else is doing. And I think that's the problem with this team, is that they have not evolved. Like, they are just very much a 2016 type team, like offense, defense, everything. I think it's all just very much right there. And there has been an explosion of innovation over the last 7-8 years. The college stuff is coming up to the NFL. Everybody's using, more motion. There's and this stuff isn't even modern. It's just like what football is. It's just regular football at this point. And they're kind of stuck back there with it, and none of it is part of what they're doing. I don't think they have an identity. I don't think they know what they want to do. And look, I think the players are kind of, I think they're starting to feel it too. Like, I think it's very close to a situation where, people are starting to look at everything like really funny. And, I think they badly need success or stuff's going to start. It's going to come to a head. I think it's right there right now.
So I want to get to a very big picture take in a second, but like the Kamara quote told me that after the game.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I don't see basically saying like the locker room ain't lost player to player, but he made it very clear that the locker room ain't lost amongst the players, right? Like his lack of mentioning the coaches said all I needed to hear. Like, I'm not out of pocket, right? That was Alvin Kamara basically saying these coaches are booty. We don't believe in them. I mean, Derek Carr's booty too. We can get there into that, but still.
I mean, if you're going to try to read between the lines, and I don't have any insight here to what he was actually trying to say or whatever, but I mean, I read it the same way. I watched it. I read, you're kind of looking at it and you're like, and he spoke with purpose there. Like, when Alvin picks his spots, and like sometimes, he kind of holds court, and it's to send the message, just to say what he's got to say, and it's to get it out. And sometimes during the week when he does his weekly availability, there is a whole different tone to it. It's being done out of like, all right, I got to check this box. And then there's times where Alvin has something to say and he says it, and he kind of leads you somewhere, and it's like, all right, what's he trying to say? And I mean, I kind of read it the same way. They're playing for each other. They aren't giving up on each other.
Yes.
They aren't going to quit on each other. And there is no tension between the players. And you didn't lose the locker room between the players. There's no bickering with the players. There's no, I thought everything he said was very deliberate, and it was to lead you somewhere to kind of be like, what's he trying to say? And I ended up the same place as you. And I agree. They haven't lost the locker room. Like, I've seen lost locker rooms. In 2014, Brandon Dederick fought another player, both naked in the middle of the locker room. That's players going at each other. Like, I don't think these guys are at each other. I think they kind of know what's wrong. And there's a lot of interviews like that where it's kind of like, guys are saying like, we're going to go out and try to, do the things that we can as best we can within what's called, what they're telling us to do. And it's just kind of like, like, what are you trying to say here? I think it's right there. I really do. I really think it's right there. And if they lose a couple more games, I think things are going to start to get like really interesting. And I think there's a chance we start to hear some things. Like, I think there's a chance there might be some pressure coming from the locker room if this thing doesn't turn around, because they are extremely frustrated. And, you see it, you see why. But again, there's 6 games, and I don't want to, be too premature on this stuff. They could win a couple. They beat Detroit, and, all of a sudden people might feel good. And that's kind of how this stuff goes. I thought last year it reached the same boiling point coming out of the Tampa Bay game. I thought it was going to fall apart, and they end up finding success, and it comes back together. So maybe that happens again. But, I do think that they are at a crossroads right here. And a loss this week, like, I'm worried about what it could do to the team. I really think that it's that close to reaching a boiling point.
But like, Nick, why not like try something different? Because what you're currently doing is not good enough. And again, like, just leaning on my days in the NFL, like, if a guy was playing bad, it didn't really matter who it was.
You talking about Jameis?
Anything, T-Bob. Like, it didn't matter what position it was. Like, if you had a string of like 3 or 4 weeks, it didn't matter your contract for the most part. Like, you were not going to play. Like, you were going to get replaced. Like, you were going to lose playing time. And I've never really seen a team like this that's like, you have a bad game, it's okay, we'll get them next time. Like, there's no next time in the NFL, but this team has that approach. Like, why are we not seeing, like, some changes or just trying something a little bit different? I know they've had some injuries, and so maybe that limits some of the changes you can make, but just to continue to roll the same product out there, to me, is crazy in the NFL.
I think that they're in this position where these people that, the people making decisions are evaluating it through the prism of we're one game out of first place. But, like, you are in the worst division in football. Like, you're comparing yourself to substandard products and trying to convince yourself that, like, you're right there. Like, we get into the playoffs and it's fine. Like,
It's
sure,
worrying.
like,
It's worrying.
yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, do what you got to do to win it. But, like, at the same time, you got to look at, like, big picture and long term. And, it's just kind of like, where do you stack up against the Philadelphia Eagles? Like, that's where I want to measure myself if I'm a team. Like, where do I stack up against the Eagles? Do I have any chance of getting there? No, I don't. Like, the Steelers are, 7-4 right now. They're a playoff team. They fired their offensive coordinator. They made changes. They did things for the long-term benefit of their team. So, I don't subscribe to the thinking of, like, you're a game out of first place, but I know that's how they're looking at it. They think, okay, we get into the playoffs, maybe we gel, maybe we get rolling.
Well, see,
as far as, like,
that makes me so mad, though, Nick, because that flies in the face of what we were talking about last week, right? That hopefully the leadership, and I won't say ownership, because I feel like, and I don't know the full extent of this, but I do feel like there's a lot of delegation taking place, which, ideally a lot of times what we want out of our owners, right? But the leadership of the Saints, my great hope was that regardless of wins, they could be objective about looking at this. But, like, as you said, this feels like a 2016 team offensively, and I've been playing with the metaphor all week, Nick. This is Jack on the Titanic, hanging on until the last minute. I mean, floating in the Atlantic Ocean, still desperately clinging on to Rose's hand, thinking he's going to survive and they're going to live together, be happy, be married, and have kids. It's over, Jack. You're dead. And I don't know, man. Like, I don't feel like there is anything that can be done that should save, I don't know how high it goes up. I mean, certainly Dennis Allen and the staff, but then, I mean, how culpable is Mickey Loomis? Like, I know he's in the power circle, so he's probably a made man untouchable, but, like, he's the one who has led the charge on this clinging and on the draft picks and on the Carr signing, which has been, to use it again, an abject disaster.
A lemon.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. Like, my biggest fear with them is that they figure out how to win a few games. They beat a couple of these trash buckets on their schedule, like the Giants, and they win enough games to win the division. And they what is that? What happens next year, though? Again, what happens next year? You do that, you win 9 games, you make the playoffs, you get smoked in the first round. You're not going to be good enough next year. So I think they got to be honest about that. For a while, my own personal thinking, I kind of felt like Mickey and them wouldn't make. I kind of just felt like they're going to stay the course no matter what. I feel differently now. I feel differently about that. I feel differently about it. I just kind of gathered a different feeling to where I think that, maybe there is a willingness to make hard decisions if things look bad. So we'll see. Historically they've been incredibly patient, but I think now I kind of view that patience as something that has to be earned. So, if there is a point where hard decisions have to be made, I actually think that could happen. I think if they don't make the playoffs, I think that's a layup. I think if they make the playoffs and it's an underachieving path there, I think there's a chance there's a shot taken, at trying to get better. So I don't necessarily feel like they're just going to stay the course no matter what. I do think that they would do some things differently. And look, I have a hard time blaming Mickey for hiring DA because I actually thought it was the right move at the time. I thought you had a guy in the building that was getting head coaching hype. I thought that you would check, you needed to check it out. And the thing that I said at the time is, like, if you let him go and he ends up being good, you're filled with regret. It's the Dan Campbell thing. Like, if you have Dan Campbell there and he's like a potential head coach and Sean Payton leaves a year earlier and you don't give him a chance and now he goes to succeed somewhere else, you can't fix that. But if you give Dan Campbell the shot and he fails in your building, you can fix that by cutting bait and making a change quickly. So, I think it's the same thing with DA. If he just doesn't turn this around and they look like this the rest of the way, they don't run the table after Detroit, I feel like you got to be serious about it and say, all right, is this the right move? And if it's not, like, you cut bait and you move on, and that's fine. You can fix it. You can get the right guy in the building this time. You gave a guy that was, getting interviews and all this stuff with the rest of the league a shot. It didn't work fine. but you got to be able to admit the mistake. That's the thing here. You can't cling to the mistake. Clinging to the mistake is the real mistake. Making the wrong hire and failing fast, sometimes that happens. Like, sometimes it's just you have all the evidence in the world. You have all the data. You think you see all the things, and then poof, it doesn't work. I mean, that stuff happens. But you got to get it right. So, I mean, that's where they're at. And I do think that if things just don't turn around, I do think that there's a strong possibility that decisions will be made.
Well, Nick, what does your crystal ball tell you? Like, if you look at what the Saints have left on the schedule, and obviously this is probably the toughest one coming up against the Lions, but what does your crystal ball tell you where the Saints team will finish, what the record might be? Like, do you think they have enough juice to be able to go out there, even with the bad teams, and make the playoffs?
Man, I mean, the bar is so low. The bar is so low to making the playoffs. I think there's a chance they still do it. And that's where it gets scary, because if they do, even in, the frustration that exists today and the way people are looking at things today, like, it could change. You get into the playoffs and you have a decent performance. Like, maybe everybody views things differently. If you get in the playoffs and you throw a Hail Mary and you actually, like, say, hey, like, I can bring this, like, talented offensive coordinator to the table. I don't see why, like, John Gruden would be the guy that would want to come here and save everything. But, like, let's say they make playoffs and they find a way to convince Gruden, you run it back another, like, there's just so much that could happen here to crystal ball it. I don't think that this works. So, like, personally, I don't think this works. Like, I got to see something drastically different. The quarterback, I think, is incredibly underwhelming at this point. It's unbelievable that, the explanation after throwing a pick six was like, well, golly, like, the safety actually made a mistake on that play. What
also, Nick,
to do? Like,
the throw was awful. It was so
terrible.
far behind. Like, not even the defender actually covering would have had a chance to touch it. It was an awful throw. But, sorry, continue.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just that throw. Like, I wrote this thing during the bye about, like, why have crossing routes evaporated from this offense? They used to be so automatic for the team. And, like, we showed all the data from, like, years past and how they just hadn't thrown any. And they went out in this game and they threw a ton of them. And they were all inaccurate.
Yeah.
Every single one of them was inaccurate. And it was just unbelievable.
Hurt.
Yeah, people getting hurt. It's just, I don't understand where the short accuracy is. But the fact that, like, you are in the red zone against single high and there is no possibility of someone reading you because you locked in on him from the moment the ball was snapped. Like, if you go look at the all 22, they got the two end zone views. I don't know where people access it. Maybe they only got one, but the thing I'm on, they got both end zone views, and you can just see his eyes on Shaheed from the moment the ball is snapped. Never looks anywhere else. What's Jesse Bates going to do? Like, and all he had to do, he didn't even have to pump fake. If he had just, like, moved his shoulder a little bit forward, Bates is jumping that. And then if you just go left to right, A.T. Perry, Chris Olave, like, both of them wide open on the backside of the formation. Like, I just don't understand. Like, if you see Bates, you just look at him. If you looked off at Shaheed for a second, you see Bates just watching the route the whole entire time. And then you get to the podium and you say, he made a mistake and played it wrong. Like, what are you talking about? You just got pick six, man. You played it wrong. I could not believe it. I just want to hear him say, like, I effed up. I want to hear DA say, like, the quarterback effed up. DA will never say anything about Carr. Carr never takes any blame. Like, there's been a couple where he's like, oh, that was a dumb throw, where there's just, like, no way to defend it. But, like, the lack of accountability in some of these moments is baffling to me. And just, like, more than anything else, like, lose the game is fine, but, like, go up there and say, I screwed up, because you know what's happening? Like, if we're sitting here saying, like, these are wild responses to these questions, what do you think the players are doing?
Yeah.
The players are sitting there saying, hey, like, my quarterback isn't out there, he's throwing me under the bus. He isn't owning anything. Like, they want to hear him say it too. Like, hey, I made a bad play. We're going to get it better. Like, we're talking about the identity thing earlier. Just say, like, yeah, we know what we want to be on offense, but we haven't got there and we got to do it better. Like, that's it. Like, don't say, like, oh, we ran the ball well. Like, we have explosive plays. Like, no, man, like, your team stinks. Like, when you aren't scoring in the red zone, don't say, like, we're moving the ball the other 80 yards, but the last 20 aren't there. Just say, like, we stink in the red zone. Our quarterback hasn't been good enough. We got to find a way to execute it. Like, I just don't understand, like, why some of the stuff isn't there. And I'm telling you, like, the players are hearing it and they're taking it the same way, and it's, like, adding to the frustration. And, I just think some of the messaging could be a little bit better.
Just should have freaking known when that dude ate at Chipotle. I don't know. Nick Underhill at Nick_Underhill, New Orleans on football side. Thank you, Nick. We kept you very long, but it is a fascinating time for the New Orleans Saints. Feels like a lot is hanging in the balance. Last game already pushed me to where, my mind is made up, but we'll see. Wow, just amazing black and gold takes right there, Jake.
I don't think I've ever heard any takes that are better than the two guys that just gave you that take.
And you can keep getting them by going ahead and liking, subscribing, ringing the bell to get notifications when we post. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next OTB Saints.